She boarded the private jet quietly, dressed in confidence, not diamonds. But when the flight attendant saw her, she assumed this black woman was lost. Until 10 minutes later, the same woman she insulted calmly pulled out a card that changed every life on that plane. What happened next will leave you speechless, and the lesson behind it might just change how you see respect, power, and silence forever. Stay till the end. And if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life power stories. She boarded the aircraft quietly, not as someone seeking attention, but as a woman who carried quiet power in every step. Her name was Dr. Kesha Washington. To the world, she was a respected leader in aerospace technology, a woman who had built her empire from scratch, breaking barriers that most people couldn't even see. But to the flight attendant who greeted her that morning, she was just another passenger. Or worse, a passenger who didn't seem to belong in first class. As Kesha took her seat 2A, her rightful spot, she noticed the subtle glances, the whispers, the raised brows, the kind of silent judgment every black professional knows too well. The flight attendant, Janelle, approached with a tight smile. "Ma'am, I think you're in the wrong seat." "First class starts from row 1. Kesha smiled politely. "I know, this is my seat." 2A, but Janelle's tone shifted. "I'm sorry, but this ticket looks off. Did you book it yourself?" The question stung, not because of the words, but the implication behind them. Around her, passengers began to watch, some curious, some are uncomfortable. And Kesha could feel it, that familiar burn of injustice creeping into a space where she had every right to exist. But instead of reacting with anger, she took a slow breath. Power, she had learned, wasn't about who shouted the loudest, it was about who stayed calm the longest. She looked at the attendant and said softly, "You might want to verify that before making assumptions." The woman frowned, taking the ticket and walking off. Kesha leaned back in her seat, her face composed, her mind already calculating the cost of what was happening. Because this wasn't just a rude encounter. This was systemic bias, the kind that hides beneath procedure and policy. A man in 1C began recording on his phone. The situation was becoming public. Janelle returned moments later, now joined by her manager, and this time the tone wasn't just skeptical, it was accusatory. "Ma'am, we verified, and this ticket doesn't match your ID. We'll have to ask you to step aside while we clear this up." Kesha's heart pounded, not from fear, but from disappointment. Even here, at 30,000 feet above the world's biases, she couldn't escape them. But she didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her handbag and pulled out a sleek silver business card. She handed it to the captain who had just arrived to handle the situation. His eyes scanned the name on the card and froze. Dr. Kesha Washington, CEO, Washington Aerospace Industries, the very company that leased half of this airline's fleet. The cabin fell silent. The passengers who had been whispering a moment ago were now wide-eyed, realizing they had just witnessed a career-ending mistake in real time. Kesha's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Before we continue," she said, "I think you should know who owns the aircraft you're standing in." And at that moment, the entire flight, from captain to passengers, understood this wasn't just a passenger. This was power, dignity, and history in motion. The atmosphere shifted. The judgmental looks disappeared, and as silence filled the cabin, Dr. Washington didn't gloat, didn't shout, didn't humiliate anyone. She simply said, "Now, Captain, shall we talk about accountability?" The storm had just begun. The cabin was frozen in disbelief. Even the captain, a man used to turbulence, both in air and on the ground, seemed lost for words. He stared at the silver business card again, reading the name that now felt heavier than the entire aircraft. Dr. Kesha Washington, CEO, Washington Aerospace Industries. He swallowed hard. "Dr. Washington," he began cautiously, I wasn't aware." Kesha raised her hand gently. "Awareness," she said softly, "is the very problem, Captain." Her tone wasn't angry. It was calm, controlled, but that calm carried more power than shouting ever could. Every word she spoke landed like a quiet earthquake. She continued, "You see, my company currently leases 67 aircraft to this airline. That's over a third of your operational fleet. I came here as a passenger, not as your business partner. But apparently respect still needs to be leased too. The manager, Jenkins, turned pale. The realization hit, this wasn't just any passenger. This woman had the power to ground their entire fleet. Whispers spread through the cabin. The businessman in 1C whispered to his camera, "She owns the planes. She literally owns the planes." The live stream comments exploded. "No way!" That flight attendant just ended her career. This is history unfolding. Kesha's phone buzzed. Dozens of messages lighting up her screen. Board members, journalists, lawyers. This moment wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was a corporate crisis unfolding live. The captain cleared his throat. "Dr. Washington, please tell us how to make this right." She looked him in the eye and said something that silenced everyone. "By remembering that every person you serve has a story, and you never know whose story you're part of until it's too late." Then, with precise calm, she reached into her bag again, this time pulling out another card. This one, black with gold lettering. Meridian Investment Group, Managing Partner, Kesha Washington. The captain blinked. "Wait, that's..." Kesha nodded. "Yes, Meridian holds a 12% equity stake in your parent company. That makes me one of your top shareholders." The air in the cabin felt electric. Power had just changed hands, quietly, gracefully but completely, for the first time. The captain wasn't speaking to a passenger, he was speaking to the woman who helped sign his paycheck. Kesha leaned back in her seat. "Captain, discrimination isn't just an act. It's a pattern. It's built into systems that pretend to be fair. And today, I intend to break that pattern." The manager stammered. "Dr. Washington, surely we can handle this internally." Kesha interrupted gently. "Internally is where injustice hides. Today we do things differently." Her voice didn't rise, but her words did. They rose into every corner of that cabin, into every guilty silence, every uncomfortable glance, every hidden bias, and then she did something no one expected. She smiled. Not a smile of revenge, but of resolve. "Let's not destroy careers," she said. "Let's rebuild systems." The captain nodded slowly, now understanding that this was no ordinary confrontation. This was a masterclass in dignity under pressure. Outside, the sun glowed across the tarmac. Inside, everyone knew they were witnessing something that would be remembered far beyond this flight. The storm of injustice had met a woman who didn't fight with rage. She fought with grace, intellect, and unshakable presence. And as the plane remained grounded, every minute ticking past schedule, Kesha Washington was rewriting what power really looks like. The silence in that cabin was almost deafening. Everyone waited for the next words to drop, because they knew whatever came next would change everything. Dr. Kesha Washington wasn't just sitting in first class anymore. She was sitting in command, not of the flight, but of a moment that would echo across boardrooms and headlines. The captain's voice broke the silence. "Dr. Washington, what would you like us to do?" Kesha unlocked her phone, the faint blue light reflecting on her calm face. "First," she said softly, "I'd like transparency." She tapped her screen, opening a document, the Washington Aerospace lease agreement, the same contract this airline had signed years ago. She scrolled until she found what she needed. Section 47, she read aloud. Discrimination and hostile environment clauses. Any lessee found to engage in discriminatory practices against protected classes while operating leased aircraft may face immediate contract review and possible termination. The captain leaned in, reading the words as his heart sank. He whispered, That's this plane." Kesha nodded. "Yes, Captain." "This plane. My plane." Her voice remained calm, almost gentle, but each word landed like thunder. The attendant, Janelle, looked frozen, her confidence crumbling under the weight of what she had just done. Passengers started whispering again, this time in awe. "Not judgment," the businessman in 1C whispered to his camera. "This woman just turned discrimination into a master class in discipline." Kesha continued scrolling. "Furthermore," she read, "any incident of this nature triggers mandatory review by the airline's executive board and shareholders." She looked up. "That includes me." The captain exhaled slowly, realizing he was standing before someone who wasn't here to humiliate, but to educate. Kesha placed her phone face down and looked around. "Do you know what hurts the most?" she asked quietly. "It's not the accusation. It's that I expected it." The entire cabin went still. I've built companies, negotiated billion-dollar contracts, and led research that changed the aviation industry. And yet one uniformed employee still sees me as suspicious because I don't fit the image in her head of what success looks like. Her voice trembled slightly, not from anger, but from something deeper, exhaustion. "This," she said, gesturing around, "isn't just about me. It's about every person who's ever been underestimated because of how they look. Every person who's had to prove they belong, even after earning their seat." The captain lowered his head. "You're right, Dr. Washington," Janelle tried to speak. "I didn't mean—" Kesha stopped her gently. "Intentions don't erase impact." Then she looked at the captain again. "I don't want anyone fired yet, but I do want accountability. Because if this airline doesn't change, I will make sure the world knows why." She wasn't threatening. She was promising. Her phone buzzed again, messages from her legal team. News outlets were already picking up whispers of the story. Hashtags were forming online. The world was watching. The captain's hands trembled as he spoke into his radio. "This is Flight 247. We're requesting immediate communication with corporate. Urgent situation. Potential policy violation." Kesha looked out the window, her reflection overlapping the clouds. Her face was calm, but her mind was already moving like a strategist at war. Not to destroy, but to reform. She thought of her mother's words, "When they see you as less, show them how much more you can be," without ever lowering your voice. At that moment, Dr. Washington wasn't just defending her dignity. She was rewriting what power means for every person who's ever been silenced. And the best part? She hadn't even raised her voice once. The hum of the jet engines filled the air as the captain switched his radio to private mode. A few tense seconds later, the call connected. "Corporate line open," said a voice through the speaker. "This is Angela in Operations Control." "What's the situation, Captain?" The captain swallowed hard. "Ma'am, we have an urgent complaint from Dr. Kesha Washington regarding an incident of discrimination involving one of our flight attendants." The cabin went dead silent again. All eyes shifted to Kesha, who sat still, graceful, yet commanding. Angela's voice came through, cautious. "Dr. Washington, are you still on board?" Kesha picked up the headset calmly. "Yes, and before we continue, please note this conversation is being recorded for transparency. I believe that's company policy under the Zero Tolerance Protocol, correct?" Angela paused, caught off guard, then replied softly, "Oh, yes, that's correct." Kesha took a breath. "Good. Then here's what happened." She narrated the event in perfect, composed detail. No shouting, no dramatics, and just precision. She mentioned every word the flight attendant said, every assumption made, and every moment that revealed a deeper issue in the airline's culture. By the time she finished, even Angela's tone had changed. Her voice trembled slightly. "Dr. Washington, on behalf of our company, I want to sincerely apologize," Kesha interrupted, not out of arrogance but control. "I'm not looking for an apology. I'm looking for reform." The cabin crew and passengers leaned closer, listening to a master class in leadership unfold. Kesha continued, "This isn't the first time a passenger has faced this. It's just the first time you had someone powerful enough to make sure it's not forgotten. What I want is change that lasts beyond this flight." Angela's silence spoke volumes. Then she asked carefully, "What exactly do you propose, Dr. Washington?" Kesha leaned back in her seat. "First, mandatory diversity and awareness training for every in-flight employee within 60 days. Second, an anonymous reporting system where crew and passengers can report bias without fear of retaliation. Third, a public statement, not a PR cover-up. A statement that admits the truth, accepts accountability, and commits to action." The captain looked stunned. The passengers, inspired. Angela hesitated, then replied, "I'll need to forward your request to our executive board." "You don't need to," Kesha said, pulling a silver card from her purse, the same one that silenced everyone earlier. It had a single logo, the airline's parent company. She flipped it toward the captain. Angela's voice changed instantly. "Wait, Dr. Washington, are you—" "Yes," Kesha said simply. "I'm the chairwoman of the board." Every eye widened. The room froze. Even the engine seemed to hush in respect. Kesha's tone softened now. "I wasn't here to test anyone. I was here to see what still needs fixing." "And now I know," Angela whispered. "Understood, Dr. Washington. I'll notify the board immediately." Kesha smiled faintly. "Good. Let's make this a turning point, not a headline." The call ended. The captain slowly removed his hat. The flight attendant, tears welling in her eyes, whispered, "I'm so sorry." Kesha looked at her and said gently, "I don't need you to be sorry. I need you to be aware. Awareness builds empathy, and empathy builds change." The attendant nodded silently, her shame turning into reflection. As the jet continued through the clouds, something inside that cabin shifted. Not just policy, but perspective. Every passenger there had witnessed something rare. Power used not to punish, but to uplift. And that's what made Kesha Washington unforgettable. The moment the jet landed, whispers had already turned into headlines. Phones buzzed across terminals. Social feeds flooded with one name, Dr. Kesha Washington. Clips from passengers had already gone viral. The calm voice, the sharp logic, the power behind silence. Respect in the sky, power in silence. Dr. Kesha Washington, trending worldwide. As the door opened, sunlight poured into the cabin like justice, finally breaking through the clouds. Cameras flashed from the runway. Journalists waited, hungry for a scandal. But what they got instead was a message that would move millions. Kesha stepped out, not as the angry passenger they expected, but as a symbol of grace under fire. She stood before the cameras, took a deep breath, and began speaking. "I didn't come here to destroy anyone's career," she said softly. "I came here to rebuild something far more important, the way we treat each other when no one's watching." The crowd quieted instantly. Her tone wasn't angry, it was honest. "Yesterday, I was just another woman taking a flight home. 10 minutes later, I became a reminder that even success, money, and power don't always protect you from bias." Reporters leaned closer. Her words weren't just for them. They were for the millions watching online, silently nodding through tears. "But this story isn't about revenge," she continued. "It's about recognition that we all make mistakes, and when we do, our greatest strength is not denial, but growth." She paused, then added something that would be quoted for years. "You can't teach respect through fear. You teach it through example." The crowd erupted in quiet applause, not the loud, chaotic kind, but the respectful kind that comes from hearts being moved. Kesha then looked directly into the cameras and said, "To every person who's ever been doubted, disrespected, or dismissed, this is your reminder. You don't need to shout to be powerful. You just need to know your worth. And walk in it." One of the journalists, voice trembling, asked, "Dr. Washington, what happened to the flight attendant?" Kesha smiled gently. "She'll still have her job, but she'll also have my mentorship. Because if I can change her understanding, maybe she'll change how she treats others. That's how cycles break, not through punishment, but awareness." That answer stunned everyone. No one expected compassion from someone who had every reason to be angry. But that's exactly why her story hit millions. Because forgiveness was her final act of power. Within hours, every major news network was talking about her. Clips played with captions like, "From disrespected to dignified, a masterclass in grace." The woman who redefined power at 30,000 feet. Even the airline issued an official statement. "We will be implementing Dr. Washington's initiatives across all global operations, effective immediately." That day, she didn't just change a company, she changed a culture. As she walked away from the cameras, one little girl tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mom, I want to be like her one day." Her mother smiled softly. "You already are, sweetheart, and you just have to remember it." Kesha heard it. And for the first time in hours, she smiled. Not as a CEO, but as a woman who finally saw the impact of standing tall in silence. Days passed. The world couldn't stop talking about Dr. Kesha Washington. Her story wasn't just a trending topic, it was a movement. Colleges invited her to speak. Airlines around the world adopted her training program. Even CEOs who had once ignored issues of bias began quoting her words in their meetings. You can't teach respect through fear. You teach it through example. But behind all the fame, Kesha stayed grounded. She didn't bask in the attention. She reflected in silence. One evening, as she sat by her office window overlooking the city, her assistant entered. "Dr. Washington," she said, "we just hit 1 billion views across social media." Kesha looked out at the skyline, her reflection blending with the lights. "1 billion views," she said quietly. "Good. That means 1 billion people just saw what grace looks like under pressure." Her assistant smiled. "You really changed people, ma'am." Kesha turned to her. "No," she said softly. "People changed because they saw themselves in the moment. I was just the mirror." A few days later, she received a handwritten letter from the flight attendant, Janelle. It read, "Dear Dr. Washington, I thought I was trained to handle every kind of passenger. But I wasn't ready to face my own prejudice. You didn't humiliate me, you healed me. I've started volunteering at a community program that teaches kids about empathy. You showed me that strength isn't in control, it's in compassion. Thank you for not giving up on me." Kesha folded the letter gently, a tear glimmering at the corner of her eye. She whispered, "That's the real change I wanted." That night she walked through her company's hangar, rows of jets lined up under the moonlight, each one carrying her logo. She stopped beside the same model she had flown that day. Running her hand along the smooth silver body, she smiled. This plane didn't just carry passengers, she said to herself. It carried a story the world needed. She looked up at the sky, whispering, "May every flight teach someone to rise, not above others, but above ignorance." And maybe that's the lesson we all need to remember, that true power doesn't shout. It stands. True leadership doesn't humiliate. It heals. And real success? It's not about owning a jet. It's about owning your peace. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. And if you believe in stories that inspire hope, strength, and respect, hit that like button. Subscribe and join us here at Facts Psychology and Motivational, where every story reminds you the most powerful people are often the quietest in the room,